Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Tabreen McEachern, and I am a credible messenger under an amazing organization called Path to Redemption, and I work inside the juvenile justice system in South Carolina. I provide mentorship for at-risk youth who are housed there, and I help them understand that there is a king in every kid. So I help them identify that king inside of them, they begin to understand that they can be more than their circumstance and their situation. So I am working very hard along with an incredible team to end mass incarceration through mentorship.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles King. I'm from Washington, D.C. I'm currently a credible messenger. I work in violence intervention for the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and I own my own nonprofit organization here in Washington, D.C. called Helping Others with Life. I use restorative justice to broker truths in order to try to prevent violence and try to reduce violence and suppress violence here in Washington, D.C. As you heard in my bio when I first came out, I'm a survivor of gun violence. I'm also criminally justice impacted. I served a 13-year sentence in federal prison, and I returned back to the community like 9 years ago. And since I've been back in the community, I've been making a positive impact on a daily basis. I work hard, daily. I work hard daily, especially with the youth, but I also engage with individuals that's in the adult system. I'm in underserved communities throughout Washington, D.C. For those who know me, everyone calls me Booby.
Peace, family. I'm Dennis Febo, founder and CEO of the West Side Insights, Health and Education Services. I've been working with the incarcerated adults and juveniles for the past 13 years out of Hudson County, New Jersey. Throughout that work, we bridged with the Credible Messenger movement, and we now became statewide, so I'm spearheading the New Jersey Credible Messenger movement, embedded with New Jersey courts and all the points in the system. And that also led into our political work, which I am currently the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery National Network. Thank you. And that organization on a national scale has been going state by state, ending legalized constitutional 13th Amendment slavery and involuntary servitude. We've been successful in 7 states in the past couple of years, and we got California and Nevada are going to be voting to end slavery this November, making it 10 states.
My name is Jason Clark. I am the director of Northwest Credible Messenger, and I started this journey because I was that kid in juvie, jail, and prison. At Northwest Credible Messenger, we're really big on capacity building. One of our sayings is there's power in unity, so we're focused on building capacity in communities, distributional equity and contracting for Black and brown leaders around our state. In doing this work, I think, thinking about mass incarceration, I think about my journey and healing and undoing trauma. So a huge portion of the work that we do for our organization is through healing. This year, we started a behavioral health agency so we could support communities in that healing, in the institutions and community. I'm thankful to be here. Our mantra is there's power in unity, so I just want to have everybody really quick say, there's power in unity. Come on.
I didn't even hear this side over here. I'm going to have to go back to this morning.
Wait. Let's do it one more time. Come on. For real this time. 1, 2, 3.
There we go.
There's nothing that we can't do together.
And speaking of unity, I really want to acknowledge the founders and organizers of NACRJ. And specifically, I want to acknowledge Cheryl Wilson, who encouraged me. Yes, give it up. Right, who encouraged me to apply for the board. But before we actually begin, I also would like every incarcerated or formerly incarcerated person in this room, could you please stand up for a second? Right. Right. Exactly. Right. I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge you and we acknowledge what you've been through in life, and even more importantly, we acknowledge your transformation, and we're here to recognize that we need you in this movement, right? I'm gonna do like you need me to get out on stage. All right, with that, I'm gonna bring us to our first question. Yes. So Holly is an author, and there's a quote that Holly often says, "Killing the kid, killing the king." Could you speak to that a little bit more?
So that came from an anthology. I'm an author, and my second book was an anthology that I did with 7 other members of our team. It's called The Path to Redemption Anthology, Strategic Lessons from Mentors to Empower the Youth. And my chapter is called Kill the Kid, Kill the King. Like I said earlier, I believe that there is a king in every kid. We work mostly with males. I'm starting to branch off a little more with the females, so pray for me. Once we help them identify that there is a king inside of them, and working in the juvenile justice system, it's really hard for them to see that. But when they are able to see that, they just become something different. These young men that I work with are highly intellectual. Once they tap into their gift, they are passing their GEDs, they're in college at 16, they're in work programs, they're doing those things, they're turning their pain into purpose. And then something changes when they get out, right? They're not able to go into a community that's conducive to help cultivate that thing that's already inside of them. So we spend a lot of time pouring into them, and then they get out and they have to go back to the community that caused them to make the choices that they made, which, led them to the juvenile justice system. I was telling my team earlier, it breaks my heart to pour so much energy into a young man, and he begins to win, and he begins to recognize his intellect, and he goes home on a Friday, and he's murdered by Saturday because of the community, because there's no safe haven, because there's no transformational homes. They just have to go back to the same community, and that needs to change.
Absolutely. And so, and we can just go down the line. Yes. And we're just going to go down the line and talk about, what does mentorship look like? We're from various states, and there may be some things that we may do differently, and there may be some universal things that we kind of do, and we kind of want to learn from each other.
So speaking to the juvenile justice system, since that's the first topic that we're going off today, I've worked in the juvenile justice system for the last 8 years. I've done credible messages. I have experience with Harvey speaking about individuals returning to communities with lack of stability and resources. I know here in Washington, D.C., but we're very invested into trying to have resources and things for individuals who are returning to the community, whether they're in the juvenile justice system or the adult justice system. But more specifically in the juvenile justice system, there's endless resources here. And I think that for individuals who may have those same issues in other places, that maybe DC may be a place that you can look and try to model some of the things that we are doing in order to give those individuals the opportunity to flourish when they walk back into the community. The credible messenger movement is very big and it's very productive because we had the opportunity to go into the facilities and engage with those individuals before they get back out into the community, which we're making social deposits with those individuals. So when they come back out, we have the credibility in order to engage them and have them buy into some of the things that we're trying to offer and that we want to do. For the most part, when you actually look at it, we will take losses. But I just believe that the resource is the most important and imperative thing with especially the juvenile justice system, because we got a lot of youth that's coming back into homes with no stability, and we really seen that during the COVID when kids couldn't even eat because they weren't going to school. A lot of kids are providing meals when they go to school, and we really got to see the impact of a lot of things, especially during COVID.
Peace. So when I was a teenager, as Boricuas, I know y'all know we really loud and really proud about. Thank you. So one day I'm waving the flag real high, and an elder came up to me and said, "What does that flag mean?" I didn't know. I was so proud, but didn't know. So I went home and I never stopped reading ever again. Right? When I learned what that meant to me and how it made me move and how it made me walk, right? It made me move in a certain way. I was empowered as a young man. And I actually dedicated my studies in school to this. Is why I traveled, and I wanted to see how culture, right? What culture looks like. And when we look at what culture looks like here in the United States, especially in our inner cities and our impoverished areas, there's a lot of similarity to what it looks like around the world. And if our young people were to understand where they came from, the power of their ancestry, the power of the blood that runs through their veins, instead of being identified with things like slavery. We did a whole Black History event. I asked the crowd, what does black mean? And a kindergartner got up, beautiful little queen, and said, slavery. She thought blackness meant slavery. We're walking around with these ideas in our mind about what we think we are. And we've done a lot of progression in the field to come up with the categorizations needed in order to feel free to. But the most important is as what we declare ourselves in culture, nationality, how we precipitate politically. So what we did is incorporated cultural education. Our mentors are called cultural educators. And what we do is we educate and advocate at the same exact time. That looks like I'm gonna give you Puerto Rican History 101 at the DMV line so you can get your ID at the same time. I'm all about efficiency, so we call each other the hitmen of the field, because I will go in and change a whole family's home. Not change, I'm gonna say that, I'm doing that, but we are impacting the home within a few seconds because we understand the resources and what is needed for that to happen. So I started by myself, and now we're over, I think we got about 40 different mentors around Hudson County that are all part of the JDI program. So the court and the judge, we're very happy with the work that we're doing. Any kid that's going in that room with a gun or any type of 85% crime, as long as it's not a waiver, they're coming to us, and that's alleviated the court. In the past 3 years since we've been running, we're at 8% recidivism with all of the kids on that roster.
So part of my journey started in mentorship. I didn't even realize, but I had a mentor in prison who was a drug addict. And when we got out, he had died a few months later. But he helped to unlock something super powerful in me. And one of the things that I did is pick up a book, right, like Fibo. And it was Mumia Abu-Jamal and Death Blossoms. And I was just looking in that book and reading about the power of community and learning about the Panthers. When I got out, I told myself, like, I'm gonna put myself in a position to be able to do something to impact this. And when I say impact this, like I'm from Detroit when I got to Seattle. Right, come on, what up, though? I used to ask myself, like, man, it's not a huge Black community here, but when I went to prison, I realized where everybody was at. So I told myself at some point in time I was gonna do something about this, and when I got out, I immersed myself in school, mentorship, et cetera. And I had worked my way into 6 months after getting off community custody working for the same court that sent me to prison. And I think the thing that I realized in that 4-year journey of near perfect performance evaluations was it's not the position, it's the person. I had an opportunity through the national network of credible messengers to be able to implement a project. And I think the mentorship approach for us was we realized that young people needed support from people who understood their experiences and understood the transformation story, more so than the war story, right? Because we all have a war story, but you can only take a young person as far as you're willing to go. So we've seen a profound impact on those young people over the course of our first 3 years of implementation. We had a 42% reduction rate in referrals to the Juvenile Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And just in our programs, we were seeing young people start to have greater attendance in school, et cetera, reductions in violence. But looking at this process, we realized that we were also mentoring those leaders who were returning citizens, supporting those young people. And that's where we shifted into capacity building. And I think for us, we have a 3-pronged approach to mentorship. That's mentoring systems. And you have to have relationships with systems because they have proximity to the young people that we're trying to support or the adults that we're trying to support. So our approach to mentorship in the systems is teaching those leaders or those staff and systems what healing looks like, what it looks like to receive credible messengers, what it looks like to treat young people with humanity, and using healing-centered engagement to teach them how to engage with those residents like the leaders that they really are and speak to their aspiration.
You know, these stories remind me, like, I learned the truth about my history from a black man on a prison tier. And I'm gonna try not to get choked up right now, but I want you to imagine this. It's like this scene, it's going in my movie, so I don't want to see this in nobody else's movie. All right. Right. So I was running around young, just had got to the line, level 4. You know, those in California know level 4 is like high maximum security. And I was looking for some black literature. I just wanted to study. I always loved to read. And his brother walked over to my cell, and I'll never forget, he walked up, he looked up at the guard tower, he was like, rack 108. Bzzz. He had a laundry bag, the mesh laundry bag full of books. It was like about 60 copies of books in there, and he sat him at my door, and I'm trying to go through real patiently to trying to find a book, and he's just standing there looking at me real patiently, and I grabbed the book, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read this one. He was like, nah. He was like, read all them books. And he said, and when you're done, I'm gonna be at you about it, right? And the brother that took my mind, when I learned the pride of who we were before slavery, right? Come on, get that up, right? Because there's something that happens in our education system that if we only learned that you was slave and you was downtrodden and you was beat, like that is psychologically, like that's psychological trauma that we continue to head down if you don't know the greatness that you come from, right? And so I say that to say that sometimes what we do, even as credible messengers, like people coming home to work back in our community, the way I do restorative process in the block with guys toting AK-47s might look very different than if me in an academic setting. So now, how do you feel? Like, y'all feel me? That's gonna look different. And so I bring this up to bring up Brother King's point, is that he talked about reimagining re-entry, and in some cases he said we have to imagine something brand new. You want to speak to that, brother?
Yes. When we was having a discussion, me and my team, about things that we wanted to discuss with you all here, one of the most important things that I realized was resources. Coming back into the community or being in the community, not even being a returning citizen, but being in the community and having access to those resources is imperative. From a personal standpoint, I could actually speak on the sustainability and the resources that I was able to receive when I was able to come back home. And those resources actually helped me be where I'm at today. Without those resources, I personally couldn't see myself sitting here on this stage talking to you all today, because I would probably be somewhere scrambling for my life. Resources is very important. I've never seen a peaceful poor community in my life, ever. Wherever it is poverty, there's no peace. But we have to also look at resources and reimagine what that actually looks like, right? We have resources in certain aspects, but we'll say the individuals don't want to come and get those resources. But sometimes we need to ask that question, why? Because sometimes a guy can't go across town, or a young lady can't go across town to a community and get a resource because they have enemies, right? They have safety barriers in their life. Not only that, they may not have child care. It's a lot of things that go into that, and it's been proven, and I've seen it, and I've actually done it myself personally, where I've took resources into communities, and I've seen people able to establish their life and be successful. I get success story calls on a daily basis from individuals that I brought resources to the community to. So I think that as a whole, looking at that, just looking at that as a whole is something we all really need to look at. Because I was told once before that we're resource rich, but we're poor, we're coordination poor. So until we can coordinate with the population that need it, then we'll keep having people asking us, what have we done? Where's the money going? Where's the resources going? Because we're giving them resources, but there isn't no one coming to get them, but no one is going any deeper than that. They're stopping on the surface because a lot of people don't want to deal with those problems because they just want to throw some money at it and say, well, we gave them an opportunity and they didn't take advantage of it. But just know that we have to open up doors. We have to give people opportunities, especially returning citizens. I bet you it's a lot of qualified people out here who can't get employment or housing because of something that they already paid their debt to society for.
When we talk about resources, like I said earlier, definitely a need for transformational homes when our youth or any returning citizens is coming back into the community. But one thing there is even more powerful is the power of social currency. And because we live in such a transactional world, we don't recognize that the greatest value is social currency, the power to build relationships. Because if you can build relationships successfully, you won't have to worry about so many ops, right, or so many enemies that you have to deal with. But that's hard, and there's a process to get there. So helping people understand the power of effective communication, helping people understand the power of everybody's individual gift collectively can make such a big change, which is why we're all up here on this stage. We all have different unique talents and gifts, just like every one of you out here. And the fact that we're all here collectively, we are fighting for the same cause. And we all different races, different cultures, but we understand the power of community and restorative justice and collective minds. And that is a great resource. That's the most powerful resource. So if we spend less time judging each other and more time trying to find out how our gifts connect, because we're all here for a purpose. Every person in this room has a gift that connects with each other in order to bring change into our world. Because the system is not going to change unless we change it. The system is designed that every part of it is to sustain itself. And the most sustainable part of our prison system, our juvenile justice system, is the people. So they're not going to let you go unless you recognize how to set yourself free. And that's why I feel like mentorship, or I know that mentorship is a very powerful tool when it comes to mass incarceration, because someone spoke it into me. And sometimes it takes other people to activate that thing that's inside of you, to speak life into what you're already carrying. And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to recognize each other's gifts, to speak life into that thing so we can provide the resources, so we can have a safe community, a prosperous community, and not one full of poverty and pain.
I would put, first we need to develop a collective awareness and sort of break out of this notion that somehow there's lack in the United States of America, that somehow there's poverty in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It's not that there's an existing poverty, it's where the money's put. Right? And if we would just reallocate some of the economy to where it belongs, we would solve a lot of the problem, right? For anybody here that's ever advocated for money from the government and their response was lack. For those of us that were funded at minimal, bare-boned effort and still were able to come out with outcomes. We know it's not the money, we know it's the heart, right? But on a principle, they should put the money where it belongs. So when I negotiate in New Jersey, I know that if a county's not funding any kind of effort towards our youth or towards anyone, period, well, we're gonna do the math. If you're charging $680,000 with external circumstance cost for per juvenile in the state of New Jersey, I just need 2 kids. And I'll fund the whole program, not bare bone. When it comes to locking the kid up, when it comes to spending money on batons, shields, grenades, guns, training, tank, they got tanks now. All the things that they can spend money on, no questions asked. But we want to run a mentoring program. You got to jump through hoops and pray to God that they give you your money back. So there are resources. We're not in a resource in lack of it. It's just us being aware of calling it out when it's needed, because sometimes if not, we become the engines for gentrification. We become the engines for incarceration in certain ways. So we have to be very careful while we're observing, we would say, cross-based analysis, so that we understood what resources should be available, and they should be demanded by the system, not asked.
So I, like Febo, believe that we're a well-resourced country. And I think systems hoard resources. They use them for, specifics that don't necessarily benefit our communities or the people who come into contact with those systems. But I think the biggest thing around resources is I see that in community too. We work in silos, we hoard resources, we don't partner, but we say words like together, unity. I think those are situations that with the resources we need to get better at, right? Because at the end of the day, we're really thinking of the end user in the work that we're doing. And those young people, those adults in those systems, they really need access to those resources. And if we don't have them and we're not working with others, then how can we help them to get them?
Absolutely. October 29th would be my 10th year home, right? Yeah. I'm trying to figure out if I want to spend it in the U.S. or not. So, but I came home at a time when we didn't really have this, or I didn't really know about this, so I really wasn't invited to this. I was forced to take a 8-week-long resume writing course, right? And I already had a resume, right? I was forced to jump through a hoop that they had built for somebody else. And there's some uniqueness to us when we come home. On one hand, there's a part of me that is very brilliant, and on the other hand, I needed my hand held, right? And so, on that note, Jason, earlier we were talking, you mentioned, how should systems in our community be ready, to receive us?
I think one of the biggest failures that I've seen is systems believing that they're the answer when they are the oppressor. Right? How can you put solution finding in the hands of the people who created the problem? So the biggest thing for me is, how do systems receive credible messengers? How do systems receive people with lived experience? How do systems receive people from community that are there to help their community members who are, incarcerated? And I think about this process for us. We look at systems, and I think it's really easy for us to beat up systems. And I've seen this in our state, there will be groups that beat up the systems, and then the systems get defunded, and then we look at those systems, and those people in the systems are the ones that pay the price, right? So I think, for us as an organization, our thought around what this really looks like is, what does it look like to really engage systems and hold them accountable, right? For us, it's teaching leaders within the system about healing-centered engagement and how they start to treat those residents with humanity, right? If you have all of these dollars to do these things, then let's teach you how to engage these people, treat them with humanity, give them the respect that they deserve, right? And embrace those people from community who are coming in to be able to create those transformative changes. When I was in prison, one of the things that was the biggest problem were the guards, right? Some of our prisons are in rural areas. They're hiring people from those communities because that's the way that economy is run. And those people don't understand what's happening in our communities. So we need to see more people from our communities there. And I think in this sense, for us, right, for everybody, for all of us in this room, we have to develop those relationships with our systems that produce results, to put them in a position of accountability to say, you know what? We're going to work with you. We're going to transform. We're going to do these things that need to be done for these young people and for these adults in incarceration. I really believe in healing-centered engagement, in that relationships produce results. So a tool, like I said, that we're using is healing-centered engagement and holding those system leaders accountable with treating those residents with respect, working collaboratively over a process of 6 months, and really, holding them to a standard of accountability with those outcomes.
Awesome. So when we are talking about preparing for returning citizens, for people to come back into the community, first it needs to start inside of the institution in which they're housed. And for me, I was sentenced to 25 years, and I wound up serving 10 years. I've been home almost 5 years now. September 12th will be 5 years I've been home. And one of the reasons why I became who helped me become, okay? And what that means is when I first started my time and I was in receiving evaluation, there was a woman who came from a prison ministry, and she came to the door and she looked at me and she said, "You are not going to do the time man said you're going to do. But God had to preserve you for a purpose." And she told me that my testimony will help change many people's lives. She told me I was going to be an author. She told me I was going to write a book. And I didn't see it then. The only thing I was stuck on was I'm not going to do the time man said I was going to do. So I thought I was leaving tomorrow, okay, from that day, like the next day. So, but I realized later on that she planted a seed. Somebody was going to throw some dirt on it, but someone else was going to come water that seed. And then something was going to grow. And so when she told me that, and I realized I wasn't leaving tomorrow, I decided that I was no longer going to be bitter, but I wanted to be better. And I said, God, whatever opportunity you afford me, I am going to take advantage of it. So the first opportunity was getting my degree in biblical studies with a concentration in ministry from Columbia International University. I ceased that thing, right? And part of the contractual obligation was that after you completed your degree program, you had to do ministry for 3 years in whatever institution they sent you. And knowing God and how he does me, he was about to uproot me because he wants me to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so I had served almost 6.5 years at one institution where, you know everybody, everything's flowing perfectly, everybody, has respect for each other. And he was like, I'm gonna send you somewhere different and see if your light is going to shine the same way. And it did. So I went to another institution in June, and someone said to me, I heard about you. You need to sign up for the Braille program. I said, okay, and everybody else was saying, you're not gonna get in there, because I've been on the waiting list for 10 years, but God, right? And so I got there in June. By October, I was in the Braille program. So I am a certified literary Braille transcriber through the Library of Congress, specializing in Nemeth and science. I never heard anybody talk about Braille. Why do I need this certificate, right? I'm like, okay, I told God I'm gonna take advantage of every opportunity, so I did. I kept my word. And afterwards, I would find out when I'm released that the thing that I can't change, which is the crime I committed, is what's going to prevent me from getting a job to be able to take care of myself. And the only opportunity there was for me to transcribe books at Georgia Tech. So while I didn't understand then how important it was to get that certification, I knew that that was the only way I was going to be able to get a job, because I had a great work history. I have all this education, I have these certificates, I have these titles, yet it's that fact that I committed a crime that's preventing everything. The thing I can't change, but I changed me. I changed my mindset, I changed all of that, and it was because a mentor came, planted the seed, another one came and watered it, another one came to watch it grow. So I became who helped me become. And I believe that it starts while you are incarcerated, and then when you come home, you're able to use those same things to help you. But in addition to that, there needs to be resources for those who could not do their time the same way. Everyone's different. Everyone has different mental health issues, different personal issues, different traumas that they're dealing with. And their story is not gonna be like mine. They may need grief trauma. They may need those things, but unfortunately, if you are on any type of probation or parole, they tell you in 60 days, you better have a job, or you're going back. Soon as you've done this time and you have started to become, you finally get out, and it's like there's a timeline for you to get it right, or I'm sending you back to jail. But no one is helping me deal with that grief, deal with that trauma. And some people deal with so much trauma trying to survive prison, you know? And I believe that I know that there should be some opportunities that while you are going through that transitional process, dealing with that trauma, their grief, there should be some type of stipend. Let them be paid for that, so when they go, after that 60 days is up, they're able to go to work and not have to depend on that check to survive, because they have gotten paid for healing because the money is there. The resources are just not allocated for the proper reasons. And so that's very important to help returning citizens reintegrate back into society. They need to be mentally healthy in order to keep a job after 60 days.
I don't know how I'm gonna follow that, but I will. Healing is the first step in reentry. Changing who you are as a person at the core is more important than anything, because when you come back into the community, allow people remember the person that you left as, especially if you don't maintain that line of communication when you go into a facility. People have a preconceived notion of when you come home, you're going to be the same person. For my own personal journey, as you heard when we first came out on the stage, that I've been shot, I've been paralyzed from the waist down. I was shot on one occasion 3 times. They told me I wasn't going to walk again, but as you can see, I'm walking. That healing process for me started when I went to prison, because before I went to prison, I didn't have that mentality of growth. I have never seen anything positive. Even in prison, I've seen positive people. Let that sink in, because people think people go to prison and they just these negative people. It's a lot of positive people inside of prison. One of the steps that I took in order to prepare myself for my reentry was to make sure that when I came home, I wasn't in a position where I had enemies. So while I was incarcerated, I actually had the opportunity to use which I didn't know at the time was restorative justice, but I had the opportunity to take advantage of engaging with the person that shot me. They weren't arrested on that charge. They was in prison on another charge. We was familiar with each other, but we had the opportunity to come to an agreement that we was going to leave that alone. And since I've been back in the community, me and that person has a relationship to this day. I can pick up the phone and call them. They can pick up the phone and call me. We check in on each other because we understood what that looks like, right? Because that's real healing. Real healing comes when you grow, when you start to mature and evolve. Coming back into the community, I knew that I didn't want to have to walk around with a firearm, right? I knew I didn't want to have to be looking over my shoulder. I have a son. I know I didn't want my son to be in danger because he's out in the public with me because of a old issue that I had from 20 years ago. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me at this point in my life. But coming back into the community, really just being focused and understanding and never losing focus when you're on that reentry path is important, because I always tell a guy that my best day in prison doesn't beat my worst day in society. A lot of people complain, they may call me, and I bring them back to reality. I tell them, you was making 23 cents an hour in jail. How much you make today, right? If you made $300 a day, you made more than you made in 6 months in prison. So, you know, just keeping that focus when I came back into the community, that's how I stayed grounded. And that's what I use with others that's coming back into the community, as well as supporting them, as I said earlier, making those social deposits into those individuals when they call and they ask me to write those letters to help them when they go up for a hearing, for an hour hearing. I've testified, I help guys get out of prison. So just coming back and just having that support system in place, but not just jumping on the bandwagon when they walk out the door, because everybody's there for the celebration when you're released, right? I call it the honeymoon phase. After the honeymoon phase, then what are you going to do, right? So I'm there through the whole long haul. I'm going to send you some money while you're in prison. I'm going to try to do something for you when you come home, and I'm going to support you as you continue to go on. And the way that I see it is we need more me. We need more of me, because we don't have a lot of people who do that. People forget you. They're there when you first go to prison, but when it's time to come home, A lot of guys nowadays are trying to see what you're going to do if the old you are going to come back out here because they're looking for an opportunity that you might not be able to present. So those are my views on healing and returning to the community.
There's this pretty cool professor out of Boston, Boricua professor, came up with a term or a diagnosis called colonialized personality disorder. And he makes a reference to, for those populations, and here I'm going to say specifically the island of Puerto Rico, which is the oldest colony in the world, over 500 years of colonialism, and how that colonialism expresses itself as behavior in society, right? So one that we're always going to remember that we have to first hold the system accountable. As he was mentioning, if the system's not accountable, then we find ourselves being at fault for our own oppression, right? And here's kind of raising the questions of, if we can heal ourselves outside of this construct, the construct itself would be, at some point, needs to be also be part of the healing. How many of those people in those positions are willing to surrender to that process? For those of us that do the work, we see that if they don't, it doesn't work. We could put all the money in the world, all the best people on your staff on this effort, and if certain people don't buy in, it's not going to work. How are we going to heal in a country, the only country in the world that can legally dehumanize you? How do we bring humanization to a people when in law they're still not human? So for me, healing needs to be systemic, which is why we fight the fight to end slavery. Because what other conversation is there to have? If your body can still be chattel, if your body can still be property, what healing is there? When we start talking about the brothers and sisters that have come out of those processes and are somehow still being able to stand successful, credible messenger movement coming together, healing looks like us coming together, us supporting each other, but really having deeper conversations. Because in a society that centers patriarchy, racism, and capitalism, it gets real easy for our own internal relationships to become transactional. Like this. And as long as we don't have that code and that discipline internally, any outside structure will easily interrupt the process. So what does it look like when we have to try to buy things for people and they're asking you, is that justifiable? You know it is, but you got to jump through hoops to argue it, right? So what we did in New Jersey, which a lot of the brothers that came together from behind the wall, we formed a new entry movement, and we do what's called meet them at the gates. So brothers are being announced to come home. People know a week in advance, and everybody shows up. Everyone shows up, what we call a love bag that has everything you need, from dress clothes and interview clothes, a laptop, a phone, and anything that you need to get on your feet is in that bag, plus all the individual support you would need moving forward. And what I love about it is when you implement these kind of things, then the government's like, can we do it? Sure you can. So they did, and now we got that program for the kids. So when they come home, we got $1,200 per kid just for stuff when they come home, right? And now that creates a big relief, because all of us know those working people coming home, how much $5, $10 is needed, right? For those of us that earn, it's hard to really understand that. $1, right? So any little resource that we could bring in the process of to be able to get them the position so that we could talk about healing, so that they could get involved in the work. We're not just bringing them through the work, we're trying to incorporate them into the work. All of the youth that we got, we're all trying to figure out which one of these are the best leaders to start positioning them to pass that torch for them to do the work and see how they come together to help their own people.
You know, I just feel like shouting out some people who, when I first came home, how many people here from GRIP? GRIP, anybody know GRIP? I know it's a few people here from GRIP training. The reason why I mentioned GRIP because Jacques Verdun is someone who gave me my first camera when I came home. Zach Williams, Robin Williams' son, gave me my first laptop when I came home, and that's how I started my business. I say that because, like, how can I say this? I often get asked people be like, well, we can do this, we can do that for you. And we got professors here on the panel. We got authors here on the panel. We got very professional people here on the panel. And I just want to emphasize that let us lead sometime. Like let us do what we know we can do, what we did inside the walls before there was even a term called credible messenger or a thing called restorative justice that you can get paid for. Am I making sense to people? Let me hear it. Because, Brother Dennis, alluded to it a second ago, but let's go all the way there, right, with the 13th Amendment, right? Like things are about to could get pretty rough for us here in this country. And we've often argued about, sweatshops and factories in China, but the plight that we've undergone behind these prison walls have gone unseen for the most part, right? I spent the last 8 years of my incarceration working as a video technician. Nobody in here would have guessed that if they didn't know my story, but I programmed the institutional channel. I not only created the programming, but I programmed the institutional channel of what everybody would watch inside the prison. You want to guess how much I got paid for that? 37 cents an hour, and that was one of the top paying jobs inside the prison, right? And so slavery behind the walls is real. And then, right? And then, come on. And then when I left, they gave me $200 and told me good luck, right? So this brother's an expert on the issue. For those of you who don't know, the 13th Amendment, I'm going to paraphrase, it states slavery shall be abolished except after having been duly convicted of a criminal offense, right? And the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in California is Article 1, Section 6. And this brother is fighting this fight all over the country, so take us there.
Thank you. I could probably be here all day having this conversation. I'm trying to condense it as small as I can, right? Number one, this is all awareness. Most of us think slavery, you think textbook, right? You need to understand slavery as an economic system, right? That's what it was. The 680,000 lives that were lost during the Civil War, that was over that economic system, right? And then when the Reconstruction Amendments came up, that we understood that that system of the 13th Amendment and convict leasing was made to restore the economy of the southern states. We have a federal holiday called Juneteenth, speaking on the end of slavery in Galveston, Texas, but no one says 3 months later, the state of Texas implemented convict leasing. How is something over if it has an exception? We were taught the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery. Not true. Not true. Actually made slavery more legal in the border states. And it was a military decree. This is why they needed the 13th Amendment. Lincoln, who we say was the liberator of the country, was assassinated over this fact. But little did most people know that Lincoln was very keen to the exception clause because he himself wrote it in DC's Emancipation Act of 1862, which gave reparations to slave owners through the Department of Treasury and by abolishing slavery except as punishment for crime. 1862, Abraham Lincoln. The exception clause goes all the way back to 1777, state of Vermont. And as we continue to abolish slavery, a lot of us don't know, slavery was already abolished in the Spanish holding states. When Lincoln and when those states came into the Union, they implemented the 13th Amendment. We brought slavery back to those states. We don't teach it this way. We say slavery ended in 1865, move it forward. And most of us are organizing as abolitionists. If you are an abolitionist and you have not included slavery as part of your abolition work, I don't know what you're doing. I want to make this straight. As much as slavery is the history of this country, so are abolitionists. This country would not exist if it were not for the abolitionist movement. And if one of the top abolitionists that we know, Mr. Frederick Douglass, himself stated the stupendous fraud of the 13th Amendment. But we have Frederick Douglass societies and Frederick Douglass holidays and murals and events, but none of us talk about the fact that he already, on his deathbed, made sure that we understood that the fight was not over. What then they called gradual abolition never finished. 150 years later, a lot of us are still residents of states that practice legalized 13th Amendment slavery. If you don't believe me, look up the court cases. They don't call you a slave. They say you lack 13th Amendment rights. This is in law, family. This isn't an idea, right? So if we start saying things like post-traumatic slave disorder, but slavery remains legal and slaves are still behind the wall, then what are we saying post for? When we're talking about reparations for slavery, are we counting the clock till today, or are we stopping the clock in 1864? So if we know slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal except as punishment for a crime, right? So when I'm doing this work, I'm going to tell y'all straight up. It took me being in the courtrooms and in the jails to be like, yo, does anybody see like this shit looks like slavery? Like, is anybody else seeing this, or am I being crazy? Watching little kids come out with chains around their waist and their ankles and their wrists and that. What are you doing? But if this is the visual that we're all okay with, then we end up in these spaces where we know what we think justice shouldn't look like, and we don't get into the conversations of what it should. And I know damn well there cannot exist any justice in any jurisdiction as long as they have slavery as a legality. I'll say it straight up. The first pillar to restorative justice and reparation should be the end of slavery. Period. Now, I'm going to say this. People in the beginning, a lot of people thought I was crazy. You know how this goes, right? But after a while, the states started moving. Colorado ended slavery, Utah ended slavery, Nebraska, Oregon, Alabama. We did on a Zoom call. I was blown away. We ended slavery in Alabama in my car on a Zoom. Right? But now, today, we have 3 open court cases, Colorado, Alabama, and Tennessee. All these cases, for the first time in U.S. history, have proceeded past the point of the exception clause. Right? Now we're arguing things like, well, does the state own the body? What is coercion? What is voluntary versus involuntary labor? What is rehabilitation? These are big legal questions. These aren't theory. And as long as our theory can embed itself in the law, I'm hoping this is what everyone is pushing and fighting for, then what theories do we need to implement when here we say the badges and incidents of slavery? Over-policing, over-prosecuting, warehousing of the body, holding bodies for profit when you don't need to hold them. The loss of the vote. Is there a connection between the 13th and the 15th Amendment? Yes, there is. Disenfranchisement didn't just mean economic, it also meant political. This is why they put these laws in, to remove from the power of the vote. So now we're arguing things like, well, since slavery's over in this state, can they vote? We don't have to legislate those now, we get to litigate them, and we're going to actually be able to create a whole new field in law. Because this has not ever happened. We have not lived in a country where slavery has been abolished. So out of the 7 states, again, California, if I tell y'all that there are people and organizations and movements and lobbyists fighting to protect slavery, I don't know what else we're talking about. Who's ready to go fight? So with that said, we incorporated the Abolish Slavery National Network in all the states that are part of the movement, and we're at 32 states. We need 38 for a federal ratification. We also have a federal bill up. Cory Booker, Senator Merkley, and Nikema Williams are the sponsors of the federal abolition bill. When we announced the abolition bill, Biden came out and announced Juneteenth. And a lot of us ignorant to this celebrated. The question becomes, how much are we going to hold this up front as a truth? Because if brothers and sisters who are on parole are still incarcerated, guess what? And if to remain in that position, you must labor. If you want to leave the state, you must have a pass. These things came from before 1864, and they still exist till today. And as long as they remain as part of what we call justice, we ain't never going to reform nothing. All right? So abolishslavery.us, if anyone is interested in understanding more of the movement, abolishslavery.us. If you're a resident of California or Nevada, please announce it to your people, organize. This is another thing with a constitutional referendum. I know that if I go to the hood and ask people to come vote, they're not going to want to come vote. If I tell them to come vote because we're going to end slavery, they're going to come vote. We might actually have an impact at the poll by having these constitutional referendums. Because now we're given the power to vote for something that actually matters, that's going to actually liberate us from our condition, not just appointing people who continue to repeat the same exact thing. I'll leave it at that.
If y'all not fired up after that, we got a problem. Meet me out in the hallway. Right.
Why you want me to go after him? Right? Whew, that was heavy, but necessary. When we talk about slavery, a lot of us are mentally enslaved. One thing that helped me become free is, now I'm not going to talk on the 13th Amendment because he killed that, so y'all, I don't need to talk about that, but I do want to talk about being set free. And one way to do that is to begin to speak a different truth over your life. So my ethics and sanctification professor, she was a philosopher. And I remember her telling me, everything you believe to be true is because you believe it to be true. This is why she said, you should not judge other people because we're all different, culturally different, racially different, our personalities, things that we like and don't like. But sometimes, like for example, we call football, in another country they call it soccer. They can't understand why we call it football when you're not kicking the ball just that one time. And we can't understand why they don't understand, right? And so she told me, she said, in one place there may be a chair, someplace else that might be a table, because that is the story they've been told, and they believe it to be true. She asked me, what is 1 + 1? I was like, 2. She said, why? Why? I said, because it's 2. It's 1 and 1 is 2. She said, why is 1 1? Someone decided it was. People believed it to be true. And it's part of our academics, is how we calculate, is how we come up with different formulas and numbers. But why is 1 1? Why do we believe that 1 is 1? Why? Can you explain that? You can't. You just decided that it was a truth, and that's how you live your life, by that truth. So the same thing is with you believe about yourself mentally. If you believe that you are supposed to be incarcerated, you're a slave, you are all of these negative things, you are your choice, you are that mistake that you made or that choice that you made willingly forever, then you're going to be stuck there. But if you begin to tell yourself a different truth, you will be set free. One of the mentors that came, she used to do a Zumba class with us. And she introduced me to the power of affirmations. And she said, I understand the situation and circumstance that you're in, but you can be set free if you begin to tell yourself a different truth and start to believe it. So I created my affirmation. Every morning I would get up and I say, today is going to be a wonderful day. I'm expecting great things to happen today. I will have positive thoughts and speak positive words. I will be a blessing to someone today, and nobody will steal my joy. I'm a healthy, physically fit, strong, virtuous woman of God who has been given a second chance. The Lord continues to bless me abundantly and work miracles in my life. I will not let him down. I am going home today. Today is my day. And after about 2 years, I started to add suddenly Jesus in there, right? And one day, after we got off a lockdown on a Friday, they called my name and they said, pack up, you got 20 minutes to get to the front. It was suddenly. I started to believe that truth, even though from the time I began speaking it, it was 5 years later before my case is overturned and I'm set free. But as I started to believe the truth, other things are happening. I'm getting this certification, I'm getting this degree, I'm getting hospice care certifications. Things are happening to prepare me for the suddenly. And suddenly I was set free. And then when that happened, guess what? Other girls began to fight. Other women began to fight, and 2 other women got their cases overturned. Because sometimes you are the standard. Even in that situation, you are the standard. And once you start to tell yourself a different truth, no matter what position you're in, whether you're incarcerated or not, your life will begin to change. And you are no longer enslaved, and you are set free, and then you get to teach other people how to do it.
When it comes to slavery, he sums it up. But for myself, when I went to prison, I went to the law library and started reading. I had never read the Constitution a day in my life. I'm going to be 100% honest. But as I started reading, something stuck out to me. At the top of the Constitution, it says, "We the people of the United States." Then I had to go and look back at the year that it was wrote. And when I looked at the year that it was written, I said, well, I'm a black man. I wasn't counted as a human. So how is this applicable to me, right? Because I really believe once I started going to the law library that, hey, they was going to give me law, that these laws apply to me. This is justice. But I come to find out that this is a business. Anytime that you start turning rooms that was created for 2 people into 3-man cells, this is a business. You shouldn't be locking that many people up. Your prison system shouldn't have exploded from a couple 100,000 people up to a couple million people or over 1 million people with no real justification. And then you turn around and talk about the laws being wrong that was created in the 80s and the 90s as far as dealing with the crack epidemic. You acknowledge that they're wrong, but you don't fix them. We're still fighting those laws right now to this day. You still have people sitting in prison right now to this day on laws that has been ruled as being wrong. So when it comes to slavery, this is most definitely a business. It hasn't changed. It has put a new mask on. And until you pull that mask off and really look at the face of the perpetrator, we'll continue to keep on thinking that it's okay because you did the crime, you should be there.
I don't know how to follow all of that up. So when I think of slavery, right, and how we embed this into our work, because I think all the other topics were touched, is the power of Sankofa, right? So with all the folks that we work with, our teams, it's looking to the past, right, to be able to move into the future while nurturing the next generation. And I think understanding our cultural history, right, building aspiration in the participants that we support, but also within each other, right, so we can have those collective actions to be educated on policy advocacy, right, the work that FIBO is talking about doing is really imperative. So I think, that piece about slavery is really teaching people what does that look like. Because I think a lot of times our history is erased, and it's not in textbooks. We're not teaching it to our young people. And primarily, we're pushing our young people out, so even if we were, they wouldn't get that information. So I think it's really imperative for us to teach them about that and then what they can do to advocate for change in the future.
So can I add I wanted to quickly, just so that we understand the connection with systemic racism. I don't know if everybody here knows, 96% of prosecutors in the United States of America, of elected prosecutors, are white. 67% of those that are incarcerated are black and brown. There are more black men that are in prison than there were black men who were enslaved during the peak of slavery. The United States, as the most massively incarcerated country in the world, 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's incarcerated, earning the GDP. The American prison system has more money than the GDP of 143 countries in the world. So there's a lot of money made off of this business. So we have to, again, mass incarceration, how do we end it is the question, right? It's something to think about. There's a lot of studies already out there. ACLU did a lot of good ones on how to reduce the prison and the jail populations. Our states and our counties have become very dependent on the services being inside of jails, right? So if we have drug rehabilitation, like in New Jersey, we have no rehab for drugs. They're in the county jails. So of course, it looks like it's mass incarceration. But if New Jersey were to invest in some infrastructure to deal with addiction, then those people wouldn't have to go to jail in order to have their problem resolved, right? So how do we redistribute the economy? Again, understanding slavery as the economic system. If we were to end it, that means the state couldn't do business as usual. To me, having slavery or the 13th Amendment exception on the books sounds like an incentive. And as long as that incentive for profit remains, it will always, the money will always be diverted into the system. As long as we remove the incentive, and here we say that we should only be housing, we're going to call it that word, and with all of the resources and information needed for that individual, how could justice look in a world without slavery?
So I think that's going to be pretty close to our time. I do want to just end with this note, like, it's almost 1,900 of us in this room, right? And I think that's pretty significant for us to start effecting some real change if we can just figure out how to stay unified, right? And that doesn't mean that we all in this room agree with each other on everything, right? We just don't have to be in opposition to each other, right? So on that note, I was already told by Rashida and Robin that if the music started coming on, I'm in trouble. So we thank you all for your time, and I think we're going to snap a selfie up here. Hold on. Come on.